Good afternoon. Today is Monday, the 6th of January, 2025, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Brian Gerrish. Delighted to have Ben Rubin with me in the studio. And we've Diane, Rasmussen, McAdie joining us by link from Scotland. Welcome, Diane. Now, first thing to say to all our viewers and listeners is thank you very much for all the huge support you gave us in 2024. Thoroughly appreciated, and we want to say we're here into a new year thanks to all your support and generosity. We never forget you, and thank you all so much for everything that you've done for the UK column to keep our news flow going. Now, the other thing that happened over the Christmas period was it was clear from emails, some telephone calls that we did take over the period, that a lot of people feeling very anxious, stressed. They sense something is badly wrong in the country. They look at the headlines, they look at the news reports, and there's a sense of confusion and a lot of stress in people. And today, as we've had a look at the headlines with the BBC, of course, we've got everything from the wars to the collapse of the NHS to problems with child abuse, all being thrown at people. This is not accidental. This is not ordinary people breaking down. This is the destruction of our country. And as we said several times last year, if you're confused, think of it that we're being attacked by our own government. Now, of course, if I make that statement, we also need to consider the position of the monarchy. And so for me, the important part of the news today is a revisit of the King's Christmas speech. Let's have a look at a clip.
Earlier this year, as we commemorated the 80th anniversary of D-Day, the Queen and I had the enormous privilege of meeting once again the remarkable veterans of that very special generation who gave of themselves so courageously on behalf of us all. Listening to these once young servicemen and women touched us deeply as they spoke of their comrades drawn from across the Commonwealth who never returned and who now rest peacefully where they made the ultimate sacrifice. Their example of service and selflessness continues to inspire across the generations. During previous commemorations, we were able to console ourselves with the thought that these tragic events seldom happen in the modern era. But on this Christmas Day, we cannot help but think of those for whom the devastating effects of conflict in the Middle East, in Central Europe, in Africa, and elsewhere pose a daily threat to so many people's lives and livelihoods. We also think of the humanitarian organizations working tirelessly to bring vital relief. After all, the Gospels speak so vividly of conflict and teach the values with which we can overcome it. The example that Jesus gave us is timeless and universal. It is to enter the world of those who suffer, to make a difference to their lives, and so bring hope where there is despair. As the famous Christmas carol, once in Royal David's City, reminds us, our Savior Holy came down to earth from heaven, lived among the poor and mean and lowly, and transformed the lives of those he met through God's redeeming love. That is the heart of the Nativity story, and we can hear its beat in the belief of all the great faiths in the love and mercy of God in times of joy and of suffering, calling us to bring light where there is darkness.
So I'll say to the audience today, I've looked at that clip several times, and personally I regard it as one of the most devious speeches that's ever come out of the royal family. But note how he presents to the audience. Of course, first of all, it's to roll off the back of people who gave their lives fighting for a constitution and a nation state that is being destroyed in front of our eyes. There was the king dripping with medals in front of people who've earned their medals. The king has not been in the face of danger at any point, to the best of my knowledge, but he was there flaunting a chest full of medals. And then I'm saying that is only a clip of the King's speech, but in the King's speech, massive promotion of the royal family and the good works that the royal family are doing. Very little actually comment and engagement with what the foundations of this nation are. But the really devious part of it was the way that he manipulated Christian scripture in order to fit in with an agenda which was clearly based on what is the World Economic Forum system, the Sustainable Development Goals, a rules-based international order, diversity, the importance of the Commonwealth. All of these were carefully crafted in a speech which was supposed to reassure the nation that everything was okay. Everything was as it always had been. We were able to talk about carols. We were able to talk about people getting together in the streets after riots, and that was all wonderful. And essentially, it was Prince Charles almost preaching as a Messiah himself. And if people are thinking maybe this is a bit of a strong critique of the King's speech, there were many other people that picked up on this, including members of the clergy who've been very, very close to the royal family. But let's have a look at one of the key things that I found very deceptive, because, of course, what was the setting? Let's have a look at what the King actually said about the setting in which he spoke.
I am speaking to you today from the chapel of the former Middlesex Hospital in London, now itself a vibrant community space.
Well, of course, that wasn't entirely true. Let's bring up on screen where he really was. And while, yes, he was at the former Middlesex Hospital Chapel, what he was really doing was speaking from the Fitzrovia Chapel. And is that simple name change important? Well, I think it is, because there's a lot behind this so-called chapel that we need to understand, and he chose this place as the setting for his Christmas speech. So the first thing is that they were not able to hold the original name of the chapel, and it was renamed Fitzrovia. But in any case, this is unconsecrated space. He describes it as a vibrant community space. But the key point that the Christmas audience didn't understand is that the chapel of the Middlesex Hospital is not and was never consecrated. So what we get is a misleading presentation about matters spiritual to the nation. And I think this is particularly important in relation to the Constitution and the fact that this is a Christmas speech. So if we put a little bit of detail in for people here, this is from London Remembers, and it gives a little bit of history that the hospital first opened in 1745, but basically the building closed in 2005, was demolished in 2008, all except the chapel, which was preserved. And then in 2024, the renaming battle was lost. And there's further statements from other sites that the chapel was never consecrated and is officially a secular place. And there's a quote here that the current trustees are seeking, I believe this is an old report, a marriage permit. So in theory, it could hold a gay wedding should someone want one in a technically secular but aesthetically undeniably religious setting. So this, to me, was deception on the nation to make it appear that he was in a Christian consecrated setting, but in fact, he was actually talking from a very secular setting. And did he do this deliberately? Let's have a think about this, because while he was standing in what many regarded as being a holy and consecrated setting, What he was actually doing was carefully putting a speech across, which was, in effect, promoting a one world religion where it didn't really matter your religion because they were all coming together in one voice for a new world. Now, if you want to understand more about the space, they hold other events, and this is one advertised as coming up in January and February 2025. If you have a look at the image on screen, you might find it very disturbing, and we shouldn't be surprised because the Roberts Institute of Art that is going to be occupying this space, I'm not even going to put up the pictures, we'll just give you some titles. Sex Part by Andy Warhol, Vauxhall Bridge from a series Pissing Women. I make no apology for saying, and yes, we're talking about urinating women. We've got Naked with Boxes, a photograph of a naked woman. Little Savages, that is a fox in resin with an element of decay. We have Body Sign, that's a photograph of a female pubic area. And we have Untitled Blue, couple copulating. So this is the sort of venue that Charles chose, I believe, deliberately to get his message across. And I think that the public really need to be aware of this. So where is this taking us? It's taking us that we've got an attack on the Constitution and on the nation state. We're going to see this increasing in the political sector, but of course the king, as the monarch, has a duty to uphold and protect not only his subjects but also the nation state. And it's clear that Charles is fully committed to helping to destroy the existing nation state as it stands. I think it's Diane, time to bring you in here, because you've also been looking at this decline over the Christmas period, and you focused on something very different, but was the parades in London.
Yes, thanks, Brian, and hello, Ben, and Happy New Year to everyone out there. I did, of course, watch the King's speech on Christmas Day, thankfully, with a mug of mulled wine in my hands, which I very much needed. And I looked at, in particular, what he was saying about diversity. So all those degenerate pieces of art that you just mentioned, it's all going to be included. Let's hear what King Charles had to say about including everyone in his speech.
On our recent visit to the South Pacific to attend the Commonwealth Summit, I was reminded constantly of the strength which institutions, as well as individuals, can draw from one another, and of how diversity of culture, ethnicity, and faith provides strength, not weakness. Across the Commonwealth, we are held together by a willingness to listen to each other, to learn from one another, and to find just how much we have in common. Because through listening, we learn to respect our differences, to defeat prejudice, and to open up new possibilities. I felt a deep sense of pride here in the United Kingdom when, in response to anger and lawlessness in several towns this summer, communities came together, not to repeat these behaviors, but to repair not just buildings, but relationships. And most importantly, to repair trust by listening and, through understanding, deciding how to act for the good of all.
And of course, the rebuilding, he was referring to some of the things that happened in 2024 by members of the British public who, in some ways just had enough and were trying to make their voices heard. But what I looked at on New Year's Day was the London New Year's Day parade, which, if you are not aware of this, has been running since 1987. The sponsors include, not surprisingly, BBC London, and the patrons include, of course, who is now Sir Sadiq Khan. So we have kind of the heads of the major establishments running this parade. The benefits of the proceeds were supposed to go to the London charities, the different boroughs within the city of London. And what I want to talk about here is that even though it was London, they were talking about putting London out to the world through this parade. There was very little British British about the entire parade. In fact, it was a bit of a mess. The commentators talked about featuring people in London and in the parade with 26 different languages, 188 different countries, and so on and so forth. There were a lot of American marching bands, which, as a former member of American marching band from my high school days, I don't mind saying that marching bands are fabulous, but whether or not they belong in London on a New Year's Day parade is a different situation altogether. They had hundreds of students from marching bands that were showing up. They flew over with their families, so very American focused and also very not sustainable at all, since we're so concerned about sustainable development. Here is the Normal marching band from Normal, Illinois, just as one of many marching bands. You can see the hundreds that were flown in for this. I have just a couple of other still images, then we'll show some video. We have Boogie Storm, which were the dancing stormtroopers that the commentators were very excited about. And they did a riveting dance to YMCA. So that was really great to see YMCA dancing stormtroopers. One of the very few British elements that we saw was Molly Hawking, who was a singer, admittedly from Cornwall. She was wearing a lovely rainbow-colored dress. I wonder what that's about. So we have a couple of video clips here. I just want to show what this was like. And this is I will say in advance that there are two audio tracks going on. This was on the side of the stream that I watched it on, which was through the Associated Press on YouTube. This is not UK Column's fault, but I think it adds a comedic effect, but it also just shows how disastrous this parade came off.
It's a hugely popular event, an event that's really, really looked forward to by so many people all around the world every single year.
Well, I'm just on flag duty, Jenna. Okay. So if you cover parade, I'll cover international cities around the world,
but really none more so than London. So this is just such a perfect representation of the world celebrating a brand new year in 2025.
Absolutely. And, I think Schwazi's probably got something to say to us again. I don't know who she's managed to find up there.
Does.
Oh, she's with Miss Christmas, our wonderful old friend Miss Christmas.
Fantastic.
Donna Maria, and with the Mini Mopes, that great old British vehicle based on the Alex Isigonis' Mini.
That's right. That's right.
So let's go and see Joe and Schwazi if we can. If not, we can just enjoy looking. There we go.
I'm a pal. Nice to meet you, my love. I'm so glad to meet you. I've been here since year one. And you think I'm going to miss this with a bit of rain? No way. This is still magical.
Schwazi, hang on. Can I say hello to Miss Christmas? There's such a loving going on there.
So we're going to sing a song. Don't rain on this parade. Right? 1, 2, 3. Don't rain on our parade.
Well, do you know what? I couldn't do that justice. But look, Miss Christmas, you're amazing. I love you. We all love you. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, and it's still the best. Hey!
Happy New Year.
You know what? Donna Maria, Miss Christmas, has taken part in every single parade since 1987. She hasn't missed a beat. But the funniest thing was, in the first parade, 1987, we didn't know who she was. She just turned up in the assembly area with her group of Christmas children and her float and what on earth is going on here, Donna Maria? It's Christmas
as we know her now.
As we know her now. And she said, I just heard that this was happening. It seemed like such a wonderful idea.
So we saw Miss Christmas there. We heard a lot of interesting commentary. 2 sets of it, actually. That was I hope I'm saying this correctly, I probably won't be, the Sri Muktajivan Swami Bappa Pipe Band, which is based out of a Hindu temple in London. I would have to say, being in Scotland, that there would be many pipe bands from Scottish ancestry that would have been happy to have served in the London parade, but they were not invited. I also next want to show you the Westminster's entry into the parade, which is the Sustainable Development Goals bus, or Sustainabus, which kind of sounds like stay on the bus. But I want to read you what it said on the website about what it was supposed to look like, and then I want you to see what it actually looked like. So what it said is that it would feature a dazzling display of sustainable fashion with stunning carnival costumes and energetic dancers. A highlight of the parade will be an open-top EV bus where a renowned band will perform live music. The parade will also showcase younger participants embracing a healthy, sustainable lifestyle, riding electric bikes while sporting eco-friendly sportswear. But let's see what it actually looked like. I've got 2 separate clips of the Sustainabus that I picked out from the video.
Well, I must say, I do have a soft spot in my heart for the borough and city of Westminster, as that is where my roots are, here in this beautiful city. So I'm a little bit biased, I must say, Bob. I can't help myself.
Well, of course, we all owe a debt of gratitude to the City of Westminster, because they let us come into their borough every year in the heart of London and perform the parade. And Westminster really is the heart of London. This is the Westminster, the City of Westminster entry in the borough competition this year. A float based all around sustainability. Have they told us anything? Oh, out there as well is their Lord Mayor, who has gone to greet them, but I'll say thank you very much indeed.
And as you were saying, the City of Westminster, really known as sort of the heart of London, boasting over 11,000 buildings of interest. That's not 11,000 buildings, 11,000 buildings of interest, of historical interest and cultural interest. And you really can't take a step without finding something historically interesting in Westminster.
So I don't know about you, Brian and Ben, but I will certainly not be planning a trip to the 2026 London New Year's Day parade. I don't know what you think.
Well, I think lots of things. Some of that will be for extra time, Diane, but clearly there is a big agenda going on, and that is to destroy the identity of this country. It's very clear. And of course, those sustainable goals are a key part of that. But let's get into a bit more of the detail as to what's going on with Ben.
Indeed. Yes, that was certainly the best that Westminster has to offer, I think, is what I would say about that. So Happy New Year, everybody. It's great to be here. I'm going to talk about grooming gangs. It is top of the agenda, as you will no doubt have noticed if you've been paying attention to the news. It's been thrust back into the public discourse over the past few days. There are people using these tragic issues as a political football, and it actually looks like this has the potential to overwhelm the Labour government. I'm going to start by showing a few clips from a video released on January 3rd by a former political insider turned whistleblower, Miah.
Children were picked up from outside school gates. Teachers knew. Pastoral teams went looking for children and picked them up from houses. And these are 14-year-old girls, white girls, 14-year-old working class, from houses with Asian men, men in their 30s, 40s, 50s. There's statutory safeguarding protocols that should have been followed. All of that went by the wayside. Of course, the classic takeaways and the nighttime economy, but it was organised. It was organised. Shabir Ahmed, the ringleader of the Rochdale grooming gang, worked out of a community centre. He was selling children out of a community centre. He had a black book of his, and he was making appointments. All of it hidden. He was establishment. He also was a senior figure on the board of trustees of the Citizens Advice Bureau. These are establishment Asian figures involved in the systematic grooming and gang rape of working class white girls. And Shabir Ahmed was a prominent figure in the Labour Party, and there are councillors to this day in that council chamber who knew him.
So Brian's just said to me while the clip was playing that is a very brave man, and I have to say I agree with him. So that's Miah. As I said, he's a former political insider. It's a clip from a video that was released on his YouTube channel. We'll provide a link to it in the show notes as ever. And I believe it was done in partnership with Turning Point UK. So all credit to them. It's a very, very powerful film, about 10 minutes long. I'm going to show a couple more clips in a moment. But this is an extraordinarily important topic. It's something the column have been covering for many, many years. In fact, really, this was the founding issue for the UK column, addressing issues of child abuse and the abuse of power by establishment figures. In this instance, Asian men in Oldham. Mr. Mayor here is based in Oldham, but this is something that we've seen across the north of England, in Rochdale, Rotherham, many other towns. And it is a stain on the conscience and the soul of the nation, for my money. We've got another clip now where Mr. Miah is going to explain a bit more about what's been going on.
These were racially motivated crimes where the victims were white and considered to be an underclass by a metropolitan liberal, so-called liberal elite of whites who considered these white girls to be, and this isn't my words, making lifestyle choices. These are the words of the social workers. How can a 12-year-old girl make a lifestyle choice to be in a takeaway, on the top floor of a takeaway with 20 men downstairs waiting to take their turn? It's horrific. Once you go into the graphic details of what happened, it's horrific. Yet none of these people are arrested. None of these people have been prosecuted. Why? It's because working class white girls were a price worth paying. They didn't matter enough. In a town like mine, they didn't matter enough.
What did matter enough? What was more
votes,
important than that?
Votes, power. 100% votes and power. The girls were white and these were racially motivated crimes. No doubt whatsoever. You take the definition of racism in any other context, apply it in here, and every marker will be ticked. These were racially motivated crimes against white working class girls.
Which demographic is responsible for grooming and rape in these northern town scandals?
Predominantly Pakistani, occasionally Bangladeshi, almost exclusively Muslim. And I've been arrested for saying that, and I'll keep saying that.
Do you want to jump in, Brian?
I want to say he is an immensely brave man, but the key thing for our viewers and listeners to understand is all of the investigative work that the UK column has done over a great many years always comes back to the fact that the system which allows the abuse to take place isn't just gangs, it's institutional, it's across all of the very government systems and agencies that say they are there to protect the children, and many of the children being abused are themselves within the supposed care system. So this gentleman, I believe, is giving a very honest and accurate view of what he sees on the streets. But the reality is that the abuse across the country over a great many years, we're certainly talking the last 50 years, has been facilitated with the help and connivance of the political system itself. It operates through the political system, through the courts, through the care system. And that is what the survivors who come to the UK column to tell their stories inevitably get to, is to say that everywhere we went for help, we were turned away. And indeed, the very brave former Met police officer John Wedger was victimised by the Met police for telling exactly the same story that this Asian gentleman is telling. And this is what the wider public in the UK need to understand. So my belief is what we're seeing here is that this system has been, this situation has been deliberately created in order to increase pressure and tension between the community, because if the government can achieve breakdown and real violence on the streets between communities in UK, then of course all of the lockdowns and the rules-based international system can be enforced very easily. So we are seeing a political system callously using child abuse as the weapon to manipulate the change agenda in this country. Back to you, Ben.
I don't know what more to say about it after that, Brian. I mean, this is your topic, to be honest with you. But I believe this is the most powerful and most divisive tool that they've got in their arsenal to come at us, actually. And this is, frankly, why this is coming to the fore right now. This issue of racial division is absolutely central to the plans for the breakdown of the nation and the implementation of this new global system. Right? This is what we're seeing happen, and this is why this is being allowed to bubble up to the surface. It's on the front page of the BBC website today, for example, where it hasn't been for a very long time. Right? We've got one final clip here from Roger Miah.
This town is run by gangsters, and the Labour Party are in bed with gangsters, and the reason why they're in bed with them is because they're reliant on the bloc vote. And I'm not on about wider gangsters, very specific Pakistani gangsters, Bangladeshi gangsters, the Islamists from the mosques. The Labour Party have made partnerships with the most despicable of groups, and they are reliant on these people to provide them with a block vote to stay in power. They've sold our children and they look the other way. These people peddle drugs, and if you go to every one of these towns, what you will find, and this is the bit I find really troubling, liberal white women. So I'm talking about, and I'm saying the word women on purpose, I'm like, part of me thinks, these are girls who have been gang raped. Surely there's some sort of empathy with women, yeah? And these are liberal white women who are quite happy to forget all of that because it comes back to politics. All of this comes back to politics and the protection of the Labour Party and the dependency the Labour Party has on these block votes.
I'll just add to that, Ben, if I may. And of course, we've had the ICSA child abuse inquiry, where, for, as just one example, a key witness who helped the whole inquiry establish itself and unfold, was ultimately not permitted to give evidence at the inquiry. Why? Presumably because that individual knew so much it was going to break the lid outside of the control of the government set up ICSA inquiry. There's a lot more to be said on that, but the UK column position is very clear. What we are watching is the cynical use of real abuse in order to ultimately cause breakdown in society, and people in UK of whatever colour or religion or none need to be really aware of what this malicious international government system is trying to unleash.
And it runs right down to the front line of local politics as well. I think is absolutely crucial for people to understand. I mean, Brian's just said a moment ago, this is the entire system. He's talked about the social workers. You've got people who are in positions of custodial positions, safeguarding positions. They're supposed to be taking care of these young people, these young women, and they are trading their lives for power, for votes. It is absolutely disgusting. And this is the Labour government that is currently in power in this country. And I think, interestingly, we talked about the racial dynamic. Actually, he brought up there the issue of liberal women, which I think is particularly interesting, given how often we're being told that we need to have more women in the public sphere, in the public domain, put into political office, right? This is not just about men. This is about men and women and the system that has enabled this abuse for decades. And where does that lead to? It leads to violence on the streets. This is from August last year. Yeah, this was sparked off by the killings in Southport, but it was caused by the context of decades of institutional abuse, decades of racialized abuse carried out by gangsters. I'm not saying that all Muslims are abusers, by the way. And actually, if you go and watch that video in full, the Rajamir video, which I highly suggest you do, it's only about 10 minutes long. He talks about the fact that there are moderate Muslims, normal people, who are calling this out in these towns. And he's just one very brave example of that, right? But it has led to violence. We've seen it, as King Charles so glibly put it, anger and lawlessness on the streets of the UK couldn't possibly be explained by anything other than just anger and lawlessness. Racist, these awful racists, none of this context was provided in the press coverage that we saw in the wake of the riots back in August, right? We're just talking about awful racists, also awful Islamophobes who've got absolutely no reason to be angry or upset. And this is only, I'm afraid to say, going to get worse over the coming weeks. And we've got to really watch this as a nation, right? So we've got people internationally who are using this as a tool to agitate the political discourse, to cause unrest, to the point of Elon Musk actually saying, should America liberate the people of Britain from their tyrannical government? This is still running on X at the moment. I would just say that to the 67% of people who've said yes, be careful what you wish for, right? We don't actually know what that means or where that's heading to, right? This could end up in really quite dark territory if we're not careful. We've even had Musk's own father, Errol Musk, on GB News talking about the backlash against Starmer being enormous. They must go. By February, I imagine he would be gone. What does Errol Musk know about this situation? And also, Errol Musk has just had his second child with his own stepdaughter. Why is he commenting on issues of public decency to the British people? And Starmer himself has stepped into the breach on this morning. We've got a short video clip here where he gives his position on the discourse that has been developing over the weekend.
Those that are spreading lies and misinformation as far and as wide as possible, they're not interested in victims. They're interested in themselves. Those who are cheerleading Tommy Robinson are interested in justice. They're supporting a man who went to prison for nearly collapsing a grooming case, a gang grooming case. These are people who are trying to get some kind of vicarious thrill from street violence that people like Tommy Robinson can live. And those attacking Jess Phillips, who I'm proud to call a colleague and a friend, are protecting victims. Jess Phillips has done 1,000 times more than they've even dreamt about when it comes to protecting victims of sexual abuse throughout her entire career. And so just as I took on the criminal justice system and the institutions when I was chief prosecutor, I'm prepared to call out this for what it is. We've seen this playbook many times, whipping up of intimidation and threats of violence, hoping that the media will amplify it. And Jess Phillips does not need me or anybody else to speak on her behalf. But when the poison of the far right leads to serious threats to Jess Phillips and others, then in my book, a line has been crossed.
It's just lies and disinformation and the far right trying to cause trouble. There's nothing behind this as far as Starmer's concerned. He calls out Tommy Robinson a couple of times, demonising him for revealing child abuse. I'm no fan of Tommy Robinson, but to hear Starmer say that is quite striking. And also he stands rushed to the defence of Jess Phillips, who is the safeguarding minister, who has rejected calls for a public inquiry into these issues. What on earth is she doing as the safeguarding minister? But now it's really important just to reiterate here, because this is going to be used as a way to drive division into the country. We need to unite, not divide, right? Crucially, this is not just about Islam. It's not just about Muslims. This is a systemic problem. Runs right to the top of the establishment, from Ted Heath to Cyril Smith, Lord Janner, Savile, right up to the top levels of the royal family. Let's bring things up to date a little bit. Hugh Edwards, the man who delivered the news on the BBC for the past 15, 20 years, himself caught paying for videos of children being raped in the last year. No penalty for him. And of course, Starmer himself, who, while he was Director of Public Prosecutions, had full visibility of the Savile case and also personally intervened to reduce sentencing for child abuse issues. So he has every right, I believe, to be concerned about where this is heading.
Serious stuff. Thank you, Ben. Obviously, we're going to be looking at a lot more of this in the coming days and weeks, but it's very clear to us people have got to look into the whole subject of abuse in a much deeper and analytical way to really see what's happening. Now, I've said it really at the start of the news, a huge thank you to everybody supporting us. If you're not already a member of UK Column, then please become a member. Or, of course, you can make a donation or you can shop with the UK Column. And we have people who sign up for lifetime membership as well as the other membership options. And we're always wanting to say, share the material, because this is why we research and this is why we produce the material. So push it out as far and wide as you can. Now, I just want to say that I picked one email from one of our supporters today who pushed through this tweet, which he'd come across an X from a gentleman called Giles Uddy. And the key statement is here: I reached a number of conclusions, primarily that the British Museum appears to not only hate Britain and British history, but also paradoxically to really rather dislike the museum itself. And what had caused this comment was the fact that as he walked through the museum bookshop, this gentleman was astonished to see book after book attacking everything that was to do with the identity of being British or the British history or British culture. And he came to the conclusion that this was effectively an attack on society itself. Now, I didn't prompt that email, but coming in as a comment from the wider public. Now, I also want to say that tomorrow I'll be putting out the first of a series of interviews with women who were abused as very young girls at the Fenethy Institution in Scotland. The first interview is with Lynn Sheeran. That will be going out tomorrow at 1 o'clock. So tune in to see that. And we're not talking so much about the actual abuse itself, but the effect on these women's lives and how they've dealt with abuse, which was often in very short periods. So for the girls that we've heard about in the earlier segment of the news, we can really understand the damage. Now, we've talked about King Charles. Let's also just focus a little bit on Keir Starmer, because he also made a speech at Christmas. First of all, let's focus on the image he likes to give of himself. Here is the educated man, properly dressed with a tie. He's carrying a book. This all signifies intelligence and the fact that he's a professional man in post running the country. Note Keir Starmer's dress when he chooses to talk to the wider public.
2024 was a year of change. Not sadly in the football, another agonisingly close shave for England, but change in politics with the election of this Labour government in July. And more importantly, with the work of change that we've begun. So I want to be clear, until you can look forward and believe in the promise and the prosperity of Britain again, then this government will fight for you. A fight for change that will define this year, next year, and indeed every waking hour of this government. We have a clear plan for change. A chance with the 80th anniversary of VE and VJ Day to cherish the greatest victories of this country and the greatest generation that achieved it. The 8th of May and the 15th of August will both be wonderful moments to come together and do that generation proud. The security of working people, that is the purpose of this government, the goal of our plan for change, and we will push it forward in 2025. So wherever and however you're celebrating tonight, on behalf of the government, Happy New Year. Here's to a year of changing Britain for the better.
Now, obviously, that clip has been edited to shorten it down, but the key point for people to understand is, one, the scorn which he regards the public. He can't be bothered to dress properly. He's going to be scruffy. He's also going to talk about football because that apparently resonates with all of us. And the key message that he gave was that there is going to be continual change in this country. Continual change is, of course, revolution. And where is he heading? Towards his World Economic Forum rules-based international order. This man is talking about the complete breakdown of society in this country in order to achieve the agenda that he has agreed overseas in Davos, and of which he's boasted in BBC interviews as his preferred place to do business because he can get things done. So whenever you hear Keir Starmer or any other politician talk about change, this is change from the nation state that you think you live in into the new rules-based international order. And we haven't even got started on describing what that actually means.
Yeah, well, a rules-based international order that comes from places like the World Economic Forum, as we've already touched on, and is predicated on the closer integration of human and technological systems using artificial intelligence. The theme for the World Economic Forum this year is collaboration for the intelligent age. They are going to completely transform the economy. It's already well underway. And they're moving now towards the transformation of political systems. We talked about this a lot over the past few months, and we're going to continue to. This is going to be one of the biggest themes of this year. World Economic Forum in Davos coming up at the end of the month, of course, so we'll be covering that in detail. But let me just draw your attention to this quote here from Lisa Witter from the Apolitical Foundation, who is a World Economic Forum global leader. She says, the future of political leadership is an intersection between political leadership and AI. 2 years ago, there was a poll throughout Europe showing 51% thought that it would be better to replace politicians with AI. This isn't something in the future. This is a now topic. And the political classes, the civil service, they're going to be running on top of a digital system, the rules-based digital system, algorithmic system that is going to be telling them what to do and what they can't do. Right? The humanity is going to be slowly and then very quickly removed from the equation. We're going to be governed by technology, and as regular viewers will know, Apolitical have been asked to establish a future vision for the whole of the country. Right, these are the people setting out the vision and technological roadmap for the transformation of our society into something that it's never been before. Right, how are they going to do it? Well, we've talked about divide and rule. Right, so racial division, issues relating to gender identity, sexual orientation, the racial issue, which is obviously front and center, the gender wars that we've again touched on already today. And I think particularly intergenerational warfare, right? That's what I'm particularly concerned about, right? They are turning Gen Z, Gen Alpha, and in fact, even just all of these artificial divisions that they're placing between us, from boomers all the way down to Gen Beta, I think I heard brought up earlier on today, are designed to create divisions, right? Humanity is just a single continuum. We're all integrated and all interlinked with each other. All of these divisions are designed to create ways for them to break society apart, ultimately. And we're going to see a lot more of that. We're going to see a lot more of this drive towards democratic innovation. Don't say we didn't warn you. This came out on the 21st of December. This is Debbie Abrahams, who is a Labour MP for Oldham East, interestingly, given we've been talking about Oldham already today, saying that she absolutely agrees with Rory Stewart, former Tory minister, on the need for citizens' assemblies to engage with communities about significant or radical policy changes, right? And this was on the Today programme on the BBC, the flagship political show on the BBC. They are trailing it. It's coming. We'll be talking about it a lot this year. With all this new technology, what's that going to mean for humanity? Well, TED have got an event coming up in April. Again, we'll be talking about this, where humanity is going to be reimagined, and they're going to be asking, what are humans for in this age of technological innovation? What are humans for? It's $9,000 a ticket for that event, by the way. And it gives you a sense of the type of people who are coming together to ask these questions and to think about the future of humanity. And finally, I'm just going to leave you with a few words from Alex Karp, one of the high priests of artificial intelligence, the co-founder of Palantir, offering his Christmas message to the world.
Is it too early to ask if you guys have considered AI-driven peacekeeping or conflict resolution software?
The primary way to create peace in this world is to scare our adversaries when they wake up, when they go to bed, while they're seeing their mistress. Whatever they're doing, they're scared. If you want to have peace in the world, that's how you do it. And that is our peace-giving offering this Christmas season to our adversaries. We are going to help this government be more transparent, work with Partnership in America, and our goal is everyone who does not like America, does not like what we stand for, does not like the West, thinks we're useful idiots, is going to be scared and uncomfortable more tomorrow than today.
And Ben, that includes, of course, the population.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that man is running the NHS.
Okay, where does that take us? Diane, I think let's bring you back on and diversifying. We're having trouble today because, of course, the world is so mad around us, and this is a pretty tough start for January 2025. But Diane, what have you got?
It is. But I just wanted to say, first of all, for those of you who didn't see our Christmas special, our last broadcast of 2024, I sent out a message to everyone saying that in 2025, that what we all need to be doing is acting global to fight global in whatever way that we can. So I'm going to include in this segment some bad news, but some ideas for things that you can do and things that people are doing to start to fight against this, because we all need to be fighting in 2025. Following all the state-sponsored child sexual abuse that has happened, that we're hearing about both in the past and the present, and have heard the news today, just this morning, our illustrious Education Secretary, Bridget Phillipson, tweeted that the Children's Wellbeing in Schools bill will start to be pushed through Parliament this week. There will be, among other things that's in this bill, and you can read the whole post about this in the show notes. There's a link there. There will be a compulsory children not in school register for children homeschooled. So if you have chosen to remove your children from being indoctrinated into the schools, they will be tracking you and they will be watching you, what your children are doing. It will so-called keep children safe by assigning a single unique identifier to children across all of the systems. So this is similar to how the NHS number works for adult social care, to test how this can improve information sharing to better protect children's safety. I would argue that that is not protecting the safety of children or anyone. What I want to get into in more detail is that it will require all state-funded schools, including academies, which could previously opt out of the national curriculum, to teach the new national curriculum, which will be coming later in 2025. Bridget Phillipson's plan to make this curriculum more diverse has just been reported on previously on the UK Column News, which I did last month. You can go back and read the start of that report, watch the start of that report. But to go into a little bit more detail, starting from the universities and going all the way down, this diversification of the curriculum is happening. So to give you one example of some things that have been reported in mainstream media just over the break. So they're finally catching up to us in mainstream media once again. It was reported by the Telegraph that the University of Nottingham and Nottingham-Trent have just led a review and found that their universities have become racist due to focusing on the undertakings of white people and have pledged to make slavery reparations as a result. The 6 people on this group identify as Black, and the University of Nottingham has removed the term Anglo-Saxon from its module titles, although it has a very well-known course in Viking and Anglo-Saxon studies. So we're continuing to diminish ourselves. The teachers union throughout the UK, which has almost 300,000 members, it told this curriculum review that is ongoing nationally throughout England that it must embed anti-racist and decolonized approaches in the curriculum, and advised that inclusive curricula should reflect diverse authors, cultures, and perspectives. This goes back a few years with the unions. This is not a brand new thing. In 2021, they passed a resolution calling on the union's national executive to take action to decolonize, which of course means destroy, dismantle, take apart the curriculum. And this is essentially mostly around anti-racism and around gender ideology. In 2020, the head teachers across England backed calls for the GCSE syllabus to be made more diverse by adding more books by authors, including titles such as Why I Am No Longer Talking to White People About Race by the Nigerian author Reni Eddo-Lodge, and The Good Immigrant by Nikesh Shukla, which should be studied according to them as set text for the GCSE exams, and also should be removing titles by Shakespeare, Charles Dickens, George Eliot, and Charlotte Bronte, for example. In 2018, the National Education Union said that schools must look beyond dead white men, and that's a direct quote, that's a very common direct quote in education nowadays, to make the curriculum more diverse. I will say, before I move on to some other countries, if you are in England, there is a group I am starting to work with called Protect and Teach. I highly recommend everyone who cares about their children, their grandchildren, any children that they know who are going to be going through the English education system or are going through it currently, to take a look at their website. I am beginning to work with them on issues such as how to remove age-inappropriate library books and creating another curriculum option other than this new national curriculum that is going to be updated, diversified, and required by the entire country. So you can look at their website, which is going to be in the show notes, and get in touch with them or me directly if you would like to help us, because we will be working together this year to fight some of this. Now, when I talk about diversifying a curriculum, it sounds really scary. It sounds very, what does this mean? So if you're not sure about this, I'm going to show you some examples from Scotland and from Ireland of what's actually going on. So in Scotland, we've had for over 20 years what's called the so-called Curriculum for Excellence, which you can see in in my video with Kate Deeming and so on, the other coverage I've done previously, is really anything but excellent. And I want to show, this is our first animation of 2025. Sorry, guys. I know people out there don't always like the animations that we show, but this is an animation to show what the Scottish Time for Inclusive Education looks like. So let's see this explanation.
Homophobia is still one of the most common forms of prejudice that young people witness and experience at school. The most effective way to address this is through education. LGBT inclusive education is a term referring to an approach of including themes related to lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender people in ordinary teaching and learning. It supports teachers to be proactive in addressing the stereotypes and stigma which can often lead to prejudice or bullying. This approach is now a national expectation for schools in Scotland. All schools have a responsibility to ensure that young people see themselves, their families, and the world around them reflected in what they learn. At TIE, we provide free resources that allow teachers to deliver this in a meaningful and effective way. Our support includes delivering the National Professional Learning Course for teachers on behalf of the Scottish Government, as well as detailed curriculum materials, learner workshops, and year group assemblies. This learning can be life-changing for LGBT young people. It also develops a greater understanding of the impact of stereotypes, prejudice, and bullying for all school pupils.
I now know that it's okay to be who I am, and there are lots of other people like me.
I've learned that over the years, laws have been made to protect LGBT people from discrimination, but it still happens, and we all have to play a part in stopping it.
So I went into digging into some examples of what this means. What are these materials that they're providing to children in Scotland? I've got some examples here just so that you can see this is available on their website. These are word problems for children ages 5 to 9. So these will still be in primary school. You can see the so-called intersectionality, the relationship between race and gender and sexuality coming out into what should be very straightforward things. Amal needs to get her dad's Father's Day cards. The cards she chooses are £1 each. Amal gives the shopkeeper £10. How much change does she get? OT wants to get her brother Obosi some padded gloves for when he uses his wheelchair. She buys a pair for £10 and pays the £20 note. How much change does she get? So we can see again the intersectionality. That's in math class. We have in Scotch language poetry, which I will not even attempt to read in Scots, but basically the title is Dottie's Got 12 Fathers. And it talks about what's the big deal. So there's one father likes this, one father likes that. It's written in Scots language. We have the rainbow for added illustration. And we have a graphic here from Tom Daly, who was rightfully so an Olympic champion, I believe in diving. This is part of one of the PowerPoints. I am proud to be gay and Olympic champion. So of course they have a typo there. So they haven't been to English class. It should say an Olympic champion. And of course he's wearing a mask, which is fabulous to see as well. If you look at the Scottish Union for Education's pamphlet, which we've put out the end of last year, 12 Views on Scottish Education, it includes an article by me called The Capturing of Libraries and many other issues that we're looking at how to address this in Scotland. So if you are in England or anywhere else, please take a look at our pamphlet. And thank you to the viewer who sent me some information about what's going on in Ireland as well. This is from the Natural Women's Council. This woman who is Donna London, who was interviewed by Rick Munn, who formerly was on TNT Radio and had me on as a guest and had several on as a guest previously. They are doing similar work to what we are doing in Scottish Union for Education and Protect and Teach. So here's a short video clip just to show you that this group really is on top of things.
Done a deep dive into this, and as you know, the Belong To is just a trans right activist NGO. They're pretending to be this grassroots group stopping all the bullying of all the trans kids. but it's all coming from the United Nations, and anyone can look up, and I'll send you the links to their plan. They actually have a plan to implement the Agenda 2030 United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. That little wheel that all of our politicians here are wearing on their lapel, the wheel that used to be a conspiracy, there's documents that we have found that show the strategy in bringing these sustainable development goals, which includes all of the gender stuff in there, into schools. They're offering schools 500 all-for-one vouchers to come up with ideas to bring in the SDGs. So it has been captured. I believe there's a lot of money behind it.
And if we look at Sustainable Development Goal 5, which is to achieve gender equality and empower all women and girls, Stonewall has an LGBT inclusion document related to the SDGs, which says Goal 5 calls for an end to all discrimination and violence against women and girls, which includes lesbophobia, biphobia, and transphobia. And so that's the Stonewall sort of interpretation, which I'm sure is correct. I also want to point out, and this is part of the Irish case, Enoch Burke. So you may be familiar with his case. He spent over 500 days in prison because he refused to address a student. He's a teacher at a Christian school, by the way. So he refused to address a student with they, them pronouns. So he was sent to prison for things related to this and his suspension from the school. At the same school as well, there is a group called Belong To in Ireland, which is a trans activist group similar to LGBT Youth Scotland. And they are visiting his school today to get the LGBTQ plus mark accreditation for inclusivity approved today on the site visit. And as we're having the news today at 1:00 on Monday, they were having a demonstration at the school to protest what happened to, and is still happening to, Enoch Burke and this site visit accreditation by the trans activist group. And so these are just examples of things we could be doing. And finally, I just want to point out, over the break, I've been reading a book called The Naked Communist by Cleon Skousen, which was written in the 50s and 60s. You can look it up yourself. But I just want to say that including putting communism into the countries in the past, things that he had identified from years of experience in the CIA and so on, was about basically promoting pornography, promoting degeneracy, homosexuality, infiltrating churches. And finally, one of the points that he made was promote the UN as the only hope for mankind. If its charter is rewritten, demand that it be set up as a one world government with its own independent armed forces. So I'm afraid that's where we are, gentlemen.
Don't be afraid, Diane. That's a very bad point to be. We are not afraid. We're standing up, and we're going to tell the truth as we see it. I'm going to say to our audience, the end of last year, when we did our final UK column news slot in my segment, I showed a roller coaster. That was my prediction, really, of what we were going to see in this year. We've hit that roller coaster with a steep drop in January of 2025. So there's a lot more of this coming. Key to it is to understand that national government does not exist anymore. This is an international government that we have in power, and it is running to the rules-based international order. That means that the old must be destroyed before we can, quote, build back better. This is the key to understanding policies as they unfold. And knowledge, of course, helps calm everything down because we can at least see the enemy. So I think we should leave it there. I'm going to say thank you very much to all the viewers and listeners joining us today, wherever you are in the world. And once again, a huge thank you for your support, because I am pleased to say your support is going to allow us to expand what we do in 2025. Let's leave it there. Ben, thank you for joining me. Diane, thank you. And for the audience, we'll be back for UK Column Extra in a few minutes. Bye-bye.